There's no Raylos, no Ray Nobodies. You guys know the rules. Start a fight, take it out in the street. Gunfights, take the shit out in the fights you start in the alley. Gunfights, you take the shit out in the street. I am your scoundrel, scheduler, chaos coordinator, Wookiee wrangler. I am here to talk about Star Wars and movie making and fun stuff like this. Anyway, first off, I did a video kind of a little more in depth about the rumors about, hey Maze, uh-oh, rawr, back. A little bit more in depth on what may or may not be happening with Kennedy and everything. I hope you all watch it. If you haven't, please do. I think I'm getting buried in YouTube's algorithm. Okay. I caught not too long ago the outrage of the Lucas, well, a while ago, I noticed it about a year and a half ago that I wasn't getting the views I should have been getting. And I'm pretty sure the Lucasfilm story group got pissed off at me. I'm a woman who expresses her own opinion. Bad. Anyway, want to talk a little bit today about something different. We do a lot of rumors and stories that are out there, but I want to talk something a little bit different. So the other day, and May's can attest to this, I discovered the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles on YouTube, and it has been wonderful to be able to sit down and actually watch these without distractions from when I was younger and trying to watch them and roommates and or parents and whatever going on, nephews and nieces and stuff like that. Be able to really get into it. And the respect, for history and the longing to basically teach history, which is kind of what they're doing in an entertaining way, is impressive as hell. And there's an episode called Hollywood Follies. Yeah, well, yeah, you can go, go watch it in your room, dude. Hollywood Follies follows, somehow Indy gets a job going from New York to LA to basically fire the film director Erich von Stroheim. Give you a little bit of history about Erich von Stroheim. Stroheim was an Austrian immigrant. His father was a count. And he considered himself an artist. He was, as what we would call, an auteur. And he was batshit crazy. Okay, he let's put it this way. There are people out there who create movies, they create art, some kind of artwork, and they're lunatics. And this guy was an absolute loon. And when you first meet him, everyone's standing stock still on the set, and Andy walks up and he's like, okay, what's going on? And they're like, shh, you can't say anything, shh. And he's like, well, which one is he? You see this bald-headed guy who looks like a Prussian officer wearing a uniform like, World War I, Austrian, Bulgarian, or German uniform, sitting on a ledge, staring intently at nothing. You're like, oh God, that's him. So Indy gets a run around. They finally get to the point where Indy can lay off the workers, and he gets up the next morning, everybody's gone, and you discover that von Stroheim took the entire cast and crew to Mexico to finish his movie. He was spending $1 million. Let me explain. Back in 1920, $1 million is a lot of money. It's like $1 billion, even more now, comparatively. So the studio, the studio head's losing his mind. Indy loses the money he was going to get, but he met along the way two very pivotal men in Hollywood. First of all, Irving Thalberg. Irving Thalberg is literally one of the greatest pioneers in film history. He was literally one of the first true producers. He was a genius. And he died very young. He had a bad heart, and died of a heart attack at I think the age of 38. And he was married to one of the greatest actresses, I think, of all time, Norma Shearer. Norma Shearer started out, like many of them, in the silent films era, and then moved into the talkies. And it was very sad, but you get to meet a very, very young Irving Thalberg. And they're all sitting around a table, this girl that Indy kind of befriends, and then, as Indy is wont to do, falls in love with her. She's a writer on the film set, and while they're sitting there, this guy named Jack Ford, black glasses, he's not that tall, but he's not short. He goes, okay, what's going on? Irving said, hey, Jack, come over here. So Ford sits down, and, I see you're having trouble. Does he speak with a German accent? He knows it's Stroheim. So he kind of gives him advice, and then when you see him again, he actually hires Indy to go with him to film the movie. And it's really interesting, the contrast between the different kinds of artists going on here. You got von Stroheim, who lives and breathes himself as an artist, to the point where everything starts to be about him. And you've got John Ford, who, what they did back then is you'd have writers, they'd write a script and just pass them off to the director. Okay, that's it. The directors had a lot of power back then, and the producers not so much. And Ford headed this script, and you get to a point where you're making movies and movies, Howdy Piranha, and movies, and back when they did silent movies, you could literally film a movie a week. I mean, because movie houses were growing. In fact, the Warner Brothers started out as a distribution and theater owners, and then they got into the studios. Okay, you could make a movie a week because you're not paying the you don't have to worry about production values because the cameras were not, the technology wasn't great and it wasn't there, but you did you used what you could. And watching a young budding John Ford navigate his way through this movie, and he had a producer with him saying, hey, this is costing us money, and you're gonna have to pull up and stop filming. All right, I'm back. I'm sorry, guys, I'm back. I don't understand why they do this. It froze, and I got booted off. It's YouTube. It's been happening quite a bit, but I'm not gonna worry about it anyway. So they're sitting around a campfire, and I know, and they're talking about what they can do to cut time, because when you're making a movie, time is money. And Ford goes, okay, let me look at the script. Gets the script, looks, and starts tearing pages out. Don't need this, don't need this. This was the editing. But you gotta remember, he kind of knows what he wants to do. Okay, one of my other favorite scenes, and this really goes back to what I want to talk about, is before they go basically away from Los Angeles to film, is, oh, thank you, Prana, is Ford and, I can't remember who it was, goes, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to go to the Cowboy Saloon and get Wyatt Earp for us. Wyatt Earp. That Wyatt Earp. Okay, let me explain something. Wyatt Earp lived in Los Angeles and was helping make westerns then. Okay, he was a very old man, but you couldn't get closer to the mythology of the American West than actually talking to somebody who was the embodiment of that. And so Indy goes in there, walks in and yells, "I'm looking for Wyatt Earp." And you see this gruff old man with this handlebar mustache looking at him, and because they wanted advice on a gunfight. And Wyatt said, gunfights didn't start the way you think they did. They really didn't. They really were kind of anticlimactic. And, it would be better if you did it as an ambush. And so they're discussing it. And while they're traveling to go film, Wyatt shows up. He's driving his car to show up to help. So you got him offering advice and just being there, which is like really, really cool. But he really did stuff like that. And I'm watching this, and I'm watching how they put this all together. And of course, at the end, Indy has to do a stunt. And it's kind of like an echoing of Raiders of the Lost Ark and the truck stunt, jumping off the horse. And it's really kind of neat to see. But what I want to talk about is, first off, I'll digress. There's a moment where they're watching the sunset as they're driving along. Hey, Pocket. And Indy goes, Ford goes, "God, that's a beautiful sunset." And Indy goes, "Wish we could film it." And Ford goes, "Why can't we?" So, unlike Eric von Stroheim, who would take 20 years to decide when and how and all the bullshit, Ford stops Caravan. They get the camera out and they film the sunset. That's what he did. Think about the impulsiveness of that, and yet when you look at his movies later, it makes sense. Okay, this is what movie making is. He is a true director. He is a true artist, and the man was humble about his profession, but there was nobody better. All right, so let's talk about what was really going on here. So we've got the idea of the Western and American film. It's a genre of American film that is huge in the history of film. The spaghetti westerns, because the Italians could not do that. Could not make Hang 'Em High and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Clint Eastwood. Then you've got all kinds of different things. And there are different kinds of westerns. You have the Indian Wars with She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and The Searchers, which is one of I think the greatest western ever made. John Ford, John Wayne, Harry Carey Jr. I've used it to explain some things, a scene from it on my channel. Where they could go to make the movies. And as Fort Apache, you're right. As you go, and of course the gunfight movies. The Man Who Killed Liberty Valance. That's a John Ford movie. Okay. You got Tombstone. Here's the thing about the Western, and if you go to watch Hollywood Follies, you're going to notice something. The landscape defines the story. The landscape defines the men and women who lived it. Okay, let's talk about, first off, the men who went west. Before the Civil War, you had people that were just looking to build their own lives, live on their own terms. The Jeremiah Johnson types, the trappers, the explorers, the Kit Carsons. Then after the Civil War, and of course, slow but surely, immigration from Ireland and Germany and everywhere kind of marched the railroads and the towns and all that to further west. All right, we have California. We have St. Louis. There's a whole area between those two places that isn't civilized. This is where this is yep, the 49 gold rush. This is where the West is. It is not necessarily San Francisco and California, even Oregon and Washington State. It's Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Texas, big time, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado. All right, it is that area between and Kansas, west of St. Louis and west of the Mississippi to a certain area in California. This is what we're talking about. In the landscape, south of North Dakota. Okay, the landscape drew people. It defined who they were. It was harsh. If you're a fur trapper up in Montana and you couldn't get down, you were stuck. You were stuck in your cabin all winter because you get snowed in. Okay, you had to live in your cabin, and your horse might be in there with you, your animals, which body heat, but oh god, the stink. If you watched the movie Jeremiah Johnson with shit. Anyway, see the movie Jeremiah Johnson, you'll see it. Okay, it's a really interesting. Robert Redford, thank you, Matt Piranha, thank you. I'm losing my mind. Jeremiah Johnson sort of explains what the trappers and the first, the people that actually went to Montana first, kind of had to go through. You get stories about some of these guys meeting the Shoshone chief Washaki long before Custer showed up to fight the Sioux. Okay, long before that. And there were tribes you were friends with. There were tribes who didn't want you around. Like, you didn't want to walk into anybody's burial grounds. Okay? All right? You just didn't want to do that. Right? The book Centennial. I have cousins who own a ranch in the Three Corners area of Colorado, near Greeley. They are mentioned in the book Centennial, written by James Michener. They talk about the first fur trappers, the French fur trapper that shows up. And what does poltergeist have to do with it? They talk about that and all that. And it's a good book. If I were you, I'd watch the miniseries. It's available. Get it. Watch it. It's a very good history. And to think that it kind of is part of my ancestry that they're talking about is kind of interesting and cool. But the thing about it is, America's, no, you get killed. If you walked or rode your horse, it didn't, a Blackfoot or a Crow or a Sioux burial ground where you see the scaffolds. Explain what the scaffolds are. They would bury or put their dead up on scaffolds because it was close to the sky. Very sacred places. If you were a person who showed up and you rode your horse through it, they would hunt you down and kill you. Okay, that was, and they did that to they did that to each other, for crying out loud. But what this movement out west did is it created a mythology about the men and women who went and settled the West. And like the last of the Mohicans. You have, like I said, Jeremiah Johnson types, Kit Carson types. Then you have the guys after the Civil War. Doc Holliday was born in Georgia. And because he had tuberculosis, he went west to help his lungs. Okay, there's a reason why they called him a lunger. This is true. Let me remind you guys. Our mythology is based on real men. So when you watch Hollywood Follies, you see Wyatt Earp. That's his stories. Those are his stories they're telling. In more of a highfalutin, glorified way. Okay, but they were telling those stories. Those are real people. Okay, they're not fake. Those are real people. And sometimes in a very fictionalized way, but still, Kit Carson was a real guy. Wyatt Earp, his brothers Morgan, Virgil, Warren Earp was also a real guy. Bat Masterson, Johnny Ringo, all those guys. And the Old West, when they were there, and we'll methodically go through it. You had the Indian Wars. Culmination was, I would say, the Battle of the Little Bighorn, because everything afterwards was sort of a downward spiral. Then you had the advent of the gunfighter. Let's go back to the Indian Wars. Buffalo Bill. He got so famous that he ended up having his own Wild West show. Okay, there's your start of the Western. Bringing all this crazy stuff. Buffalo, real Indians. Sitting Bull used to tour with him. That Sitting Bull. All over the place. Even Washington, D.C. for the president. Okay, the West was a place of mythology, of wonder, of curiosity for the American public, but also all over the world. Buffalo Bill took the Wild West show to England so Queen Victoria could see it. Okay, that's how, intriguing our frontier really was. Then we get the gunfighters and the ranchers and the ranch wars, and you have a bunch of cattlemen, and then some sheep farmer shows up, and it's like and the cattlemen had a definite reason not to want sheep around, because cattle won't eat grass all the way down to the root and kill it. Sheep will. Okay, and they just didn't like them. Okay, so you had that going on. You had the range wars. You had cattlemen fighting each other. And all this stuff going on. And of course, you had prostitution, Dodge City, Deadwood, South Dakota, Tombstone, Arizona, you name it. You had gambling halls. Those two kind of went hand in hand. Show troops would show up they had theaters where there would be burlesque shows, and actors would show up and do like performances of different soliloquies from Shakespeare and all the rest of the stuff. Dancing girls, all this stuff, because they're silver mines, so you want to entertain the miners. You got cowboys showing up for the ranches, and the railroads, of course. I can't remember Pocket. I don't know what that movie was. But you get all this stuff in these towns, and a lot of these guys were there because they didn't follow the rules. Okay, Wyatt Earp, for instance, got arrested for thieving horses when he was a kid. Okay, you could be a lawman in one town and an outlaw in another town. It just depended. Tell you a story about Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday, he's in Dodge City, decides to go to Colorado, I think. Gets into a fight, exchanges words, shoots the guy that was, screwing with him, goes back to Dodge City, where he's safe. And it's really interesting, the loyalties going on, and the just the violence that was going on. Like John Wesley Hardin, probably one of the most notorious murderers of the Old West, killed 40 men, they say. He's asleep in a hotel room, guy next door is snoring. So, but think about it. Those are clapboard walls. So if the guy, has a coughing fit, it'll wake you up. Wesley Harden shoots him through the wall and kills him. Has to flee town. Okay. It's very interesting how all of this sort of mixed up into a thing where you have this burgeoning mythology. Which is why when I think about Greco-Roman mythology and I think about Achilles, Hector, Ajax, Paris, all these movies, or all these stories in Greco-Roman myth, they were probably based on actual real human beings. Okay. Which is because that's what we've done with our own mythology. Our own, hey Takari, our American culture, we do have it, is based on this very masculine, explorer, this visceral, gritty storytelling. Because the people it's based on were very masculine, very gritty, and they could be violent. Doc Holliday, Bat Masterson said he was a pretty good guy, very loyal to the Earps, la la la. But then he starts telling stories about, well, this kid pissed him off and he shot him. Wyatt Earp, when he was in let's talk about Tombstone. Tombstone is a story that sort of people really don't understand it. First off, the Earps, I mean, when you're watching the movie Tombstone, and Ike Clanton calls them pimps, they were. Okay, they were. They had their hands in a lot of different establishments all over Tombstone, as far as gambling and the whorehouses. And what's interesting to me is that when you start looking at the actual story, get ready for it, because we're kind of experiencing it again. The Earps were Republicans. The Clantons and McClowrys were Democrats. And it was basically Civil War 2.0. Okay? And that's really because you had the sheriff who was like, okay. And then who was like on the Clanton side. Then you had the town marshal who was not. So it's all very like, and it's political. The fight between them was political. And once Morgan Earp was murdered, Wyatt went on his vendetta ride. And when you watch the show Hollywood Follies, you get a sense that Wyatt really didn't think all too much about all of that. Okay, it got blown up into this thing because people back east, wanted to know about these gunfighters and gamblers and cattle thieves and murderers and, cattle rustlers and all this stuff. And, I mean, a snot-nosed killer like Billy the Kid became a legend. All right, he was, a guy like Wild Bill Hickok, who's kind of a shit, became a hero. Calamity Jane, who was, oh God, would follow him around like a puppy dog because she was in love with him. I'm like, are you kidding? But this is back then. No account for taste. That's all I'm going to say. This is all stuff that we now look at as part of, it's part of who we are. Yeah, and you're right, Piranha. And back then, there was no real state law. There wasn't an FBI. There wasn't a sense of a set federal, even after the Civil War. Before the Civil War, you use the sentence, the United States are. After the United States is, we really became a union. But still, in the areas I'm talking about, control, there wasn't a whole lot. They had to be laws unto themselves, you know, and you know, it it's very interesting how this became sort of the American mythos. And when you look at Star Wars and the quote unquote underworld, you get a Western. I'll explain to you the first movie. You have a kid who's living on a dirt farm with his aunt and uncle. He wants to go off and explore the world, but he can't because his uncle needs him running a dirt farm. And while while he's there, this girl gets kidnapped by this really bad guy who just kind of shows up. So the kid meets this old man to go rescue her, and they go to this town and meet this gunfighter and this really tall Indian. They go and rescue the girl. Okay? The girl turns out to be the kid's sister, the guy who kidnapped her, unbeknownst to him, the guy who kidnapped her, and the kid is, right, she's the kid's sister, and the guy who kidnapped her is their father. Okay, that's a Western. That's simply put, that's what it is. George Lucas is able to take American mythology, because it's separate from anything else, because no other country really has Wyatt Earp and Bat Masterson and any of that. They really, I mean, England has, you know, King Arthur and Hay House Treaties, and you know, Italy and Greece and the entire all Western culture has Greco-Roman mythology. The Scandinavian countries have Nordic mythology. We have, and they all kind of echo each other. Ours is different. Ours is really different. And it says a lot about the American identity. Was born on the prairies of western Kansas, in the mountains of Wyoming and Colorado and Montana, in the hot, dry, arid places of Texas, on the cattle trails, on the, out in Arizona by the silver mines, California with the gold rush, on the Oregon Trail, in the deserts. That's where, and it's different. It's a different mindset because of those stories about these people who are real. And it's really interesting when you start actually looking at their biographies that weren't. You have to go actually, when you look at their biographies, find ones that were more recently written, because the yellow novels, the novels that were written, Bat Masterson in 1907 was asked by a magazine called Human Life to write about the Old West. And it's very interesting this is how he described a gunfighter. Courageous, but anybody can be courageous. He also has to be proficient and an expert with his pistol. Then he also has to be deliberate. There has to be deliberation. And what he means is you have to think it through. Okay, so he describes in one instance where he'd seen guys that were courageous, couldn't handle a pistol, got themselves in trouble and got killed. Then he'd see guys that were courageous, who could handle a pistol, didn't think it through and got killed. The three things combined made Wyatt Earp, made Doc Holliday, made Bat Masterson. Okay, when you watch A New Hope, and Solo and Greedo are having that face-off, and Han is looking up there, and he's got his leg up, and he's looking at Greedo, and he kind of looks up at his hand. There you go, right there. Okay, there you go. He is literally planning and thinking about his next step. That's what a gunfighter does, okay? And when you've got somebody like John Ford back in the early days, putting that up there with the advice of Wyatt Earp, it gets very real for people. It gets very, there's a sense of real knowledge and reality to what they were doing. And it's really, really cool, but because when you see it translated in Star Wars, then it means something more. Because you get these characters that you could see in a bar in Tombstone, you could see in a bar in, Waco, Texas, or, you name it, Dodge City. Like, I mean, for the better part, look at Mos Eisley and think Dodge City, Kansas, or Tombstone, Arizona. And they could be doing the same thing. I mean, Garrido isn't deliberate because he thinks he thinks he's got the drop. But he doesn't. Because he's dealing with somebody who's very carefully considering his next step. Okay? And that is basically what Bat Masterson was talking about. Yeah, I mean, but when you watch it, he's putting it all together. It wasn't just, you know, when they go back to sit down, he's working out how he's going to do it. And when he looks up at the thing and starts doing that, Greedo's looking up because he's already planning on getting his beady little eyes away from him. And what he does is that, and the rest is history. All right. It's really fascinating to watch that. And then when you realize, I mean, even the scene when they're looking down at Mos Eisley, that's a John Ford moment. If he's not looking, you'd be surprised if if you ever shot a pistol. If you're not a natural pistol shot, and I'm not, I'm a natural shotgunner, a natural rifle shot, but pistols are different. It's a whole new breed of cat. And if you're not a natural, you gotta work, 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 work. And when I first started shooting, I could have my pistol 3 feet away from the target and I wouldn't hit center mass. It's recoil, it's trigger control, it's sight alignment, and I mean, Ron White said it best in one of his comedy skits. He's watching cops and these guys, they get into a gunfight with two guys, bank robbers. The guns go off, bank robbers drive away, and the cops chase them. Nobody got hit. 10, 15 rounds were shot, nobody got hit. Think about it. Pistol shots are not easy. I mean, unless you're if you're a novice, unless you're standing from, a foot away and you got the barrel of the gun stuck in the guy's ribs, you may not hit him. It may go everywhere else. It's not, first off, it's how you hold it. I have never in my life shot any of my pistols with one hand. You have to be a really good shot to be able to do that. I mean, and you have to be really strong to do that. It's always like this. I'm a lefty, and I just, I cup it like that. Or, and when, like, one of my favorite pictures, because it's so funny, Harrison Ford with the DL-44, and he's got his finger around the trigger. I just want to walk up to him and pull the finger out and say, don't do that unless you're going to shoot somebody. Okay, you never put your finger on the trigger unless you're going to shoot. Ever, 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 ever. Never let me see you do that. But it's being a really good pistol shot, and Bat Masterson has a point. Is something. It's an art form. And yeah, and you're right. But There's a story Masterson tells about a a couple of cowboys got drunk and rode their horses around Dodge City and started firing at a theater. And there was Eddie Foy. He was a comedian, was in the theater doing his thing, and shot like 4 or 5 rounds. And clapboard again. I mean, a baby could go through those boards, and scattered everybody. And Wyatt Earp was standing there watching all this. He was one of the town deputy marshals. He pulls out his pistol, misses him the first time, hits him the second time. He didn't kill him, but he didn't kill him right away. But the guy eventually died of his wounds. Moral of the story is this. With a pistol, you may or may not hit what you're shooting if there's distance between you and your target. The closest to a real gunfight that I've ever seen in a movie was the gunfight between Johnny Ringo and Doc Holliday, where they're like this far apart and they're snarling at each other. That is closer to what I think probably would it really look like than, you know, if you're watching the movie The Quick and the Dead and they're standing 20 feet apart. I will say this, a revolver is a little easier to learn to shoot for some reason. I don't want a revolver though to carry concealed. Just me. Yeah, it did. And, you know, I'm not sure if that's what he was shooting during the OK Corral. I'm really not. I'm not really sure if that's what he was shooting. You know, you had Doc Holliday on the shotgun, the Earp boys with their pistols, and there you go. You know, and that's the, you know, what happened. But going back to how John Ford's vision and how the Western is part of Star Wars mythology. When you've got a character like Han Solo, would you expect somebody like that to show up in a science fiction movie? No, until George Lucas did it. Would you expect a gangster, a crime lord like Jabba to show up? You have to remember, just because the Empire's in control doesn't mean they're in control. Okay, you can have a strong central government, but there are parts that they can't really keep a lid on, and that's where the Jabbas and the crime syndicates and the wild, you know, like Narshada would thrive. It would attract not necessarily lesser people or people of low morals. It would attract people who didn't want to be bothered by the Empire or by the Republic. And that's what the Old West, that's what people did when they left New York and whatever and went west because they wanted to live their lives. And they wanted, you know, there's a great line in Lonesome Dove when Call, Woodrow, and Gus are talking about going up to Montana. And Woodrow's leaning against the fence going, I'd like to see Montana before the bankers and lawyers show up. And Gus, yeah, he starts saying, you gotta be kidding me. You're nuts. I don't want to do this. And it says something profound about the kind of, because that's who they were. I want to see this country before civilization arrives. Think about what that means. All right, that there's and it's strictly American, a certain breed of human being that is always going to be looking for their own place and to see what's over the next hill. And to, wherever they go, eventually the seeds they planted are going to sprout up civilization. That's what being an American is. And, you know, it's a really unique and profound story. and it's uniquely American because when the British went around, they conquered everything. When the Romans went around, they conquered everything. It's a story of, and they brought civilization with them. We showed up in dribs and drabs, and eventually civilization followed. But the dribs and drabs were mountain men, trappers, explorers, gunfighters, gamblers, the U.S. Army trying to tame the the Native Americans, and it's something, you know, when you think about it, it was different. It's a different history, and watching it translated on the big screen by John Ford and seeing, you know, the differences between different directors, von Stroheim, the auteur, the Ryan Johnson. I am an artist. Wow, okay. And John Ford looking at the script and tearing stuff out because he needs to be under budget. He needs to be on time. Time is money. We gotta get this thing done. And remember, they can make a movie a week. And back then, given the technology, and you know, watching his vision when he just pulled over after Indy says, "That's, you know, why can't we film at sunset?" And so they do. They film it. That was something really, in my opinion, a really profound moment and an ode to the favorite director of many guys that we revere now, Spielberg, Lucas, etc. Okay? Because remember, these guys grew up on these movies, which is why you get a Western feel to Star Wars, which is why you get a saloon and a gunfighter, outlaw, whatever, which is why you get this dusty, isolated, desolate planet, kind of like Monument Valley, kind of like, you know, Death Valley. Okay? But it's in a different galaxy. It's in a galaxy with technology that we can't even fathom, spaceships, etc. But still, you get that splash of uniqueness that makes at least that part of Star Wars, that part of the franchise, stand out from everything, stand out from Star Trek, stand out from everything. And it's really something that I really think Jon Favreau himself understands. If you watch the movie The Searchers, there's a scene where John Wayne is framed in a doorway. You watch The Mandalorian, the opening scene. Mando, it's literally the same scene, only it's Mandalorian, it's Mando, it's Din Djarin standing in the doorway. It's the same exact shot. One was John Ford, one is Jon Favreau. Right. Very, very, very cool. And hubby came home to mow the lawn, apparently. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about this because it's something different to talk about. If you're not familiar with Westerns, I suggest I'll give you some to watch. The Searchers, Rio Bravo, the original True Grit, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Lonesome Dove, that'll make you cry, a couple of places, Centennial, Tombstone, there's a lot of them, 310 to Yuma, the newer one, it's all just, it's because then you'll see how the shootist, yeah, then you'll see how it affects other genres, and how George Lucas incorporated these feelings and these same sort of things into Star Wars. And when you watch, and I'm going to tell you something, when you watch a John Ford movie and you see like Monument Valley in the background and the guys that are this big and they're slugging it out, they're fighting, and then go back and watch the original Star Wars with Luke and Obi-Wan looking down at Mos Eisley. They're looking down. It's far away. It's small. And the landscape is huge and desolate. That is a John Ford screenshot, right there. That is something he would have done. That's the magic and the ode George Lucas paid to him. And it's really, it's very profound when you think about it. It's very, and they're still trying to keep that up in Mandalorian. But don't discount the Western feel. Even though Jabba's more based on Al Capone than he is Daddy or Papa Clanton, the guy who ran the Clanton and McClowry outfit, which is interesting. I mean, there were cowboy gangs and stuff like that, but Jabba's more of he's not Cosa Nostra, but when you look at the Hutts and they have their clans, they kind of are Cosa Nostra. So you've got a little bit of that element too, because that's profoundly American. Because the American Cosa Nostra is way different than the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. Hey, Sikori, it is way different. I mean, I'm going to tell you something about the Sicilian Cosa Nostra. They have no problem killing politicians and judges and lawmen. They have no problem doing that. The five families in New York and the rest of them avoid that at all costs. Okay, they'd rather buy the politician. Back in the old days, that's what they would do. They would buy the judges. I mean, that's what Al Capone owned the mayor of Chicago. And so when you think about the Hut clans, that is Cosa Nostra. But it's an interesting blend of two American, true profoundly American cultural phenomenon in a way. And I know this conversation is probably boring for some people. There's only so much rumors, stuff we can talk about. Let me explain. I did a video today on my take on Doom Cox's latest stuff. I talked about it yesterday too, but the video is a little better. It's a little more. It's more to the point. But we don't know what's going on, and I don't see the value in constantly talking about it. Yeah, they were and they weren't, because I look at their clans, and that's more built up like the five families in New York. The Bonanos, the Colombos, the Genovese, the Lucchese's, and of course the Gambinos. Okay. You got different factions of Hutts, and they behave like the five families. And when you look at the way Jabba does his business, he does buy politicians. He did, the Hutts did buy a Grand Admiral, I think, in one of the Han Solo trilogy books. Han had to go and take the guy's bribe to him, and he got there and dropped it off. And then this is the scene, basically. He's told to go and hide because there's some major league VIP visitor, and Han's hiding, and he hears and these heavy steps, booted feet coming. And he hears a conversation with this disembodied, deep voice accusing the Moff, or whoever, I can't remember what the guy was, of corruption and taking bribes. And Vader force chokes him and then leaves. And you know, that's a Vader thing, but bribing an official is something, and owning an official is something that Cosa Nostra would do. How is Boba Fett gonna fare? I'm gonna watch it. I don't care. It's a Jon Favreau event, and I don't intend to miss it. I want to see it. I kind of can't wait. There's a rumor out there, I think it came from Star Wars Direct, that there will be a Wookiee in the show. A Wookiee's going to show up. Anybody want to guess what Wookiee that might be? If that's the case, guess who else is going to show up? Han frickin' Solo. Okay, we're going to see Solo in this. So this is going to be very interesting. Very interesting. It's going to be interesting how, if it's set 5 years after Return of the Jedi, how they're going to set this up, but it's got to be Chewie. It's got to be Chewbacca. You know, if I mean, someone said, what about Dr. Aphra's Wookiee? I'd rather vomit. I don't want to see that little skinny dyke sadistic bitch anywhere near live action Star Wars. Okay, I mean, the only people that like her are either men who are virtue signaling to get laid, or women who hate men. Okay, or people who are virtue signaling just so they can get attention. That's it. No, they're probably going to deep fake him. The deep fake with Luke worked really, really well. So they're probably deep fake. But I predict Larry Rhodes on Rhodes Rants predicted this, that Han's going to show up. And it's interesting, but if they're following anything from the EU, and the more we're getting to hear about this, the more it looks like they're bringing a lot of the EU into it, that we might see a sort of, you know, because Boba Fett does say this in the EU, I never had a problem with you, Solo. I can see that happening. You know what? They may do that. The rumor that they're basically giving the High Republic the boot. I don't know if it's costly or not. The rumor that they're giving the High Republic authors the boot is tantalizing. It's interesting to note that when I go on to Star Wars Twitter and the accounts I watch, they're not tweeting much right now. You know, but again, we don't know. I don't like the idea of not knowing what they're going to do with of not knowing about Kennedy's fate. I hate that Disney isn't transparent. I hate that. And the reason is this. Suffer the PR disaster that's only going to last 3 seconds, because the fans who have been dying since she took over need to know that you guys are taking care of it. Okay. I would much rather pull a Band-Aid off and have it ouchy for a few seconds than, you know, 5 years from now going, Kennedy, what? Where did she go? Because they're trying to act like nothing's really going on. And it's like, for crying out loud, stop it. You know, we need transparency. That's what we need. Transparency is good. Hiding like a chicken shit is bad. Okay. I am appalled at some of the lack of understanding. We want certainty. You're right. And the people that will scream on Twitter don't count. All right? They don't count. They can sit there and think they count, but they don't count. And I'm certain she's done. How? I don't know, but I'm certain she's done. If they're not making any sequel trilogy characters, if it looks like they're using the first Timothy Zahn trilogy to map out their Star Wars verse, and what, the kids were born, 5 years after Return of the Jedi? And this is taking place 5 years after Return of the Jedi? We could very well see the twins and Anakin. You know, they were, OG Star Wars had her show on today about the Solo family. And I listened for a couple hours. And as cool of a bad guy as Jason was, I don't think I'd go that far as having any of the kids go to the dark side. Or maybe, you know, whatever. As heartbreaking as they might be, Matt Piranha, they might be Foundation. As heartbreaking as Anakin's death was, we don't need to see him or Chewbacca die. That I agree with George Lucas. Stop killing people off. I think she's, you know, Rhodes Rants says this June or this July is when we're going to find out. I still say by May the 4th, or maybe a little after. But we're going to find out sooner rather than later that she's leaving. If you watch the video I made, my theory is that, because I was told by somebody that was pretty close to having everything right all the time, pissed me off, that they took Indiana Jones 5 away from her. Okay, so what the hell is she doing hiring Waller-Bridge? See where I'm going? She hires Leslie Headland over the heads of the Bobs. She fires Gina Carano against the wishes of Jon Favreau and over the heads of the Bobs. Not even discussing it. She then puts it out there that they've hired Phoebe Waller-Bridge. They just announced another cast member too, and it was a woman, another woman. Weirdly, she kind of looks like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I think. And of course, Mads Mikkelsen. You don't. House Atreides, that's a really good excuse to be worried. I'm not worried, and I really wish people would stop it. Because here's the deal. Padre Pio said, stop worrying. He had a point. Don't worry anymore. Personally, I'm getting fucking sick of hearing about it. Okay? People look for things to have anxiety over, and it's like, some of us are like, I can't do this anymore. What do you want? You know, they may not replace her. My theory is they won't. Or they'll put some no-name like, you know, Mohsen Gupta up there to just basically sign checks and you know, get licenses for production places where they're going to make the movie, locations. That's it. The rest, Favreau and Filoni. All right. So, I don't worry about that. All right. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think the story group, they could go both ways, but now I'm starting to really think the story group, and not just the High Republic shit, but the entire story group is going to be gone before she leaves. Because she threw Pablo under the bus, big time. Well, you're going to have a Dark Jedi like Joris Sebeo. Somebody actually suggested Gary Oldman. I think he'd be great. I also think that Anthony Hopkins, if he was a little younger, would be great. But again, I'd be very, very careful about doing any live action if it's during the time between or after Return of the Jedi, if you've got to have original trilogy heroes. Because I gotta tell you something. You want to start World War III? Start talking about recasting Han and Leia. Because nobody will agree. And there'll be fans that love it. There'll be fans that hate it. Okay. The best thing you can do, deep fake, or go digital, or go animated. And personally, I would go deep fake on the shows that they're not going to be in. If it's live, that the show's not about them. But if it's a feature film or a series about Han, Leia, and Luke, I would go with the kind of animation they used in BioWare. And the reason is this. You actually don't have to worry about getting an actor because you will be able to make whoever's doing the pantomime, the acting, look like Harrison, Carrie, and Mark. Okay. And it'll be real enough that, it'll look good. It'll look really, really good. And you take away something for people to argue about. And that really would make me really happy, okay? I mean, I belong to an Indiana Jones group, and there are ageist dickheads whining about Harrison Ford. They're supposed to be Indiana Jones fans, right? It's kind of like ageist or dickheads yelling and screaming about Alden Ehrenreich. Bad choice of actor. Bad, just bad all the way. Well, the Skywalker deepfake in Mandalorian was glorious. And you didn't hear me going, oh Christ, he's too tall. You want... My thing about replacing actors is that you want the people who originally portrayed these characters to go on. Okay, you want that person in that role. And there are ways to do it now and into perpetuity. You want to do a live young Han Solo origin story that reboots that dumpster fire Solo? Please, by all means, get Anthony Gruber. He's still young enough, he could do it. Yeah. All CGI, less headaches. And as someone who wanted to actually act and get into directing, I don't think I look at actors as being a headache. I do know that he and Harrison did clash a few times, and Mark was incessantly asking questions, which is fine. But it's one of those things where it's like, I can see his point. My point is this. It would save an argument going on in the fandom. This is replacing. Harrison Ford doesn't work in that way. I want it to be good too. I want it to look, I want it when I want to be able to sit down at the theater with my popcorn and soda, put my feet up, and just see my old friends again, the way I remembered them. Going to a Bond film when you're at the fifth guy to play Bond, you're no longer really watching this. It's hard to explain, but it doesn't mean as much as seeing Dr. No and The Man with the Golden Gun and all the Connery ones and even Roger Moore. At least, you know, those are the two I grew up with. They were completely different, but they were friends. To me, they were familiar faces. When you get others who don't have that presence, it's kind of like Timothy Dalton didn't. Pierce Brosnan was close. After watching Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, I was a little bit like, I mean, he was fine. He just didn't, pull my trigger. I didn't feel like I was really watching Bond. There's something really, but see, I don't like replacing characters or actors. I don't think it's needed anymore. I don't think it's disrespectful, especially to actors that play that character for 40 years. You know, there's only one Han Solo. They tried, and look how bad that went. Okay, fans were getting sick of it, and it wasn't just, everyone likes to blame Backlash for The Last Jedi. No, the movie, Alden Ehrenreich sucked. Okay, let's be honest here. Alden Ehrenreich was a dumpster fire. Okay. I mean, he was bad. Poor casting, poor actor, no business being in the movie, no business playing that role. And he knew it. I mean, Mays, if he's still here, Mays likes to point out that there's an interview on the red carpet, Alden Ehrenreich, and he's stoned out of his mind or drunk. But he knew the movie was going to be a disaster. He was the wrong guy for the role. Matt Piranha, there are a lot of people who can do that voice. It's really interesting. I've heard others, I've seen shows where that voice is done by other people and it sounds okay. Voice, but it's mechanical too. Okay. Harrison Ford has that deep baritone. Alden Ehrenreich, when he opened up his mouth, it sounded like his balls hadn't dropped yet. It's like, who hired this child? Who? The role of the gay cowboy in Tombstone, he could have played that role instead of Jason Priestley. There you go. That was, Chris, that was Anthony Ingruber. And he's the sweetest guy. Oh my God, he's such a nice guy. And every profile picture he's got on his social media is of him with Harrison. Mad, you got to hear what he said about that. Okay? He is mowing the lawn right here. I don't know what we're sitting here for. It's starting to piss me off. There we go. He's going now. I think he's doing it just to make me mad. But no, replacing actors in this day and age when you don't have to is silly. and you want to keep up, yeah, yeah, you want to keep up continuity, and you want, I want the generation growing up, when they see Han Solo, they see Harrison Ford. When they see Indiana Jones, they see Harrison Ford. There's no need to replace him anymore. There isn't. I mean, what are they gonna do? Have another young or Indiana Jones and Dad adventure? Who the fuck is gonna replace Sean Connery? Dwell on that one for a little while, okay? It, it's. There are people that are irreplaceable, and when you start replacing characters, the story loses. Or you start replacing actors, the story loses what it really means. Oh, really, Chris? That's interesting. I think Jason Priestley actually punched Harvey Weinstein out one time. So, there you go with that one. But when you replace, like I said, when you replace actors, the story starts to lose meaning. In franchises. It starts to become, fast food. It just doesn't mean what it once did. And that's the part I have a hard time. And try to replace Carrie and all hell will break loose. All right? Because they won't be able to do it. There are girls that look like they're fine. But Carrie was more than just a look. There was a fire there that she's the only person who had that fire. Okay? Anyway, I gotta go. I'm probably gonna go and lift weights downstairs, play with the dog a little bit. It's really cold and windy here. It actually snowed. I was like, are you kidding me? It's the... Yeah, he could see, as a young Han Solo, I could see it. Carrying the character into after Return of the Jedi, let's go in a different route. Let's go into a different route. And if they used a little bit of deep fake technology, you would probably notice it wasn't him. Because I've used reface on Anthony Ingruber and put Harrison over him, and it's like, it's the same person. So anyway, I'm gonna rock. I wish there was more to talk about as far as rumors are going, but there isn't. But really, go check out Hollywood Follies and just watch it, because the contrast between the batshit crazy Eric von Stroheim and John Ford is remarkable. And John Ford, when he started out directing, was Jack Ford. Okay, so they're gonna be calling him Jack in the movie. But it's a good lesson, in how movies were made and where the Western fits. No, we've got an acre to mow, and it snowed. I just want you to know he's mowing the lawn, and I wouldn't doubt that we're gonna see more snowflakes. Anyway, I gotta go. But just watch some of those westerns I suggested, and think about a lot of the John Ford stuff and how the Western mythos is part of Star Wars. Okay, and go watch my other video because it needs views. Okay, you're ordered to do that. Anyway, Steph signing out. See you around the galaxy.